Thank you, Mr. Chairman, General Amos, Admiral Greenert, and Secretary Mabus. Thank you so much for your service to our country. I think my first concern concerns, Mr. Secretary, your comments about the United States Marine Corps and that we're going to bring them back to their maritime mission. But given the lack of shipping, I think that that's a real problem. Now, it's my understanding, and let me, General Amos, let me take it to you. It's my understanding that this takes us down to a capability of one being able to deploy at sea one Marine Expeditionary Brigade. Is that correct?
No, sir. Well, it just depends on how you load it, and it depends on what the threat is and what you're going to do. But a single, I haven't had the benefit of actually doing the program 5 years ago and figuring out how many ships it took to put one Marine Expeditionary Brigade's worth. If you load it all up and you get everything on it, it's 17 ships. But when you start thinking about going against an enemy, you've got to determine, okay, well, where are my ships, and am I going to have 17, and what's the enemy going to do? What's my force buildup as I come ashore? So not every enemy is the same. If we had a Saddam-like enemy, we could afford to probably take a different approach. But the number for one MEB is 17 if you put everything on it. Doesn't mean you can't mitigate it if you don't have 17. I hope I.
So we're essentially giving up the Marine Corps' doctrine, traditional doctrine of saying we're going to do two. We're going to be able to deploy 2 Marine Expeditionary Brigades. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. We've agreed that the forcible entry for our nation, the capability for our nation, are 2 Marine Expeditionary Brigades.
But we won't be able to deploy them at sea simultaneously. So we will not be able to. And essentially, the Marine Corps is being its missions being constrained the same as the other armed services, in that we will engage in one conflict and do a spoiling or holding action on another, but we will not be able to engage in 2 simultaneous major conflicts. Is that correct?
Sir, I think you had the strategy correct when you said we'll be able to engage thoroughly in one combat or one conflict and be able to also engage in another to deter expectations and that type of thing.
Okay.
Yes,
Mr. Secretary.
You were talking about deployments and having our Marines on amphibious ready groups out and about. Under our shipbuilding plan and under this strategy, we will have 9 3-ship ARGs at all times to take Marines around the world to do what they do today. We will have 1 4-ship ARG based in Japan, and we will have 1 large deck amphib to be globally tasked to wherever the situation requires. There were 2 things here. One was amphibious assault requirement.
Well, I'm very concerned about the reduced capability, and I would hope that, let me just say, I believe in cuts, that everything ought to be on the table, but I believe in cuts that don't compromise capability, and the cuts that are envisioned, that are put forward today, really do compromise capability. Let me just mention a few issues that I would hope that you all would look at. And the Israeli Defense Force is a military organization that is always on a war footing, but yet they're far more reliant upon their reserve components than our military is. And it seems to be that we've institutionalized a very large standing military. Although we've relied on the reserves more, I don't believe that we're relying on them to the extent that we could, at a great savings in terms of personnel costs, where we're not cutting into acquisition costs. And that's something that I believe you all ought to look at, as well as the other services as well. And I think in slowing personnel cost, given the fact that clearly we are going to have an in-strength reduction at some level, I believe that we ought to slow down the promotion system. And that's something that hasn't been mentioned today. And I think it would be beneficial to the professionalism of our military that our personnel have more experience in time and grade, before they advance. And so I think that that's something that hasn't been explored, ought to be explored. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Pingree.